Well, I'm glad for the chance to be with all of you, and I hope I don't say anything stupid. Can't make any guarantees about that, but I'll do what I can. A little update on the bio that was read. I am no longer working for BYU Idaho. I hadn't better be if I'm going to have a beard. So I used to teach for them. I used to serve as a teaching group leader, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall in terms of feeling the need to move on to other things, and so I did. But one thing that teaching for BYU Idaho did for me is it prepared me for working digitally, for working remotely, for working with the Zoom platform and all of that stuff. So it's actually strange to be back giving a live demo. I'm glad to be. I'm happy to be, but it is strange. I haven't done one of these for a long time, so that's why I hope I don't say anything stupid or bump into furniture. But
We're a very advanced organization.
you are. Well, I learned about Intermountain Society of Artists back in, I can't remember, way back in another century, in the 90s, I think it was, or maybe the late 80s. Excuse me. There was a group of ISA artists who came to the 5 Points Mall in Bountiful and set up there in the hallway of the mall and showed their paintings. And I learned about the Intermountain Society of Artists then. It was near about the time I also learned about Utah Watercolor Society. I ended up joining UWS in 2010, or maybe 11, I can't remember. And then I ended up serving as its president in 2013 and 14. So, or was that 14 and 15? It's all a blur. And so now I'm serving as a delegate from Utah Watercolor Society to the Western Federation of Watercolor Societies. It's great that we have organizations that do the work that we do to promote the visual arts. And I'm glad to have an opportunity to participate not only with my organization, but also with other organizations who asked me to come and present. And so we're doing a good work. We're doing the work that needs to be done. It seems that people, when they live their lives and they get to a point where they have a little more time in their life, art starts to become important. And people of a certain age start to show up at events like this. And I think that's fine. We still try to reach out to younger generations and try to help them to see the value of the visual arts. And we just try to continue on helping to promote the cause. Yes, Jean?
One question. Do you know if Utah Watercolor Society ever was able to get the Western Federation of Watercolor Society show up? Because I know...
This year?
Yeah, I know...
No, it did not happen.
I know not live, but online, because I know...
It is online.
But for the general public, because I know I entered so I can see it, but what about the general public?
I think so. Mara would know, Mara or Christie.
Yeah, she was working on it when I last talked
Yeah.
to her, but it had...
Okay.
Okay.
This has been quite a work in progress. Utah Watercolor Society recently hosted the Western Federation of Watercolor Societies. Idaho had to go online last year. We were trying to do it live, but at the last minute, things were such that we couldn't do it. The Utah Cultural Celebration Center wasn't willing to take in so many people and risk COVID-19 exposure, so we ended up having to go online. So we played it by ear, did what we could. And so, eventually it'll be available to the public if not. However, the link that you have, you could certainly share with anyone else, and they would have access to it for what that's worth. All right, well, let's get into the presentation itself, and let's move this little dog and pony show along, shall we? My name is Tom Howard. I'm an artist, interloper, in general, all-around ne'er-do-well. Thank you for giving me a chance to dish out a little self-deprecating humor. Let's move on. I have two YouTube channels that I have recently developed. One is my main channel, Tom Howard, and it's a channel where I post a lot of my studio work, videos of my studio work that I'm doing. And then I have Plein Air Haven, which is a very easy channel to find. It's virtually the only one out there in YouTube land called Plein Air Haven, so it's easy to find. Tom Howard, there are a lot of us. There's even a bodybuilding porn star that's Tom Howard. There is, but...
Is that your day job?
Yeah, well, oh boy. Anyway, I tried to do the name justice. But I have those YouTube channels and I'm working to grow them. I haven't posted any videos for about a month, but I plan to do some more soon. Over the years, as I have taught, not only have I learned how to teach, but I've learned, I think, what is basic and essential for every artist to have and know. And this is kind of a general overview of what I feel is needed for every artist. I base this on the old-fashioned food pyramid. This is the art pyramid. And this is good for your art health to build strong artists. Ha 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 ha. So the foundation of it all is drawing and drawing skill. I advise you to take more than one drawing class. I advise you to get several drawing classes under your belt and learn all that you can. Accompanying drawing skill and ability is understanding composition and design. That goes with drawing skill very much. Add to that color theory, and from there, it's a matter of applying all of that knowledge and understanding to the medium of your choice. Now, I'm a bi-media artist. I jump between watercolor, oil painting, charcoal, graphite, rocks and sticks, not really, but I like to play with different mediums for a variety of reasons. This is a watercolor that disappeared. I have no idea where it's at. I took it to class to show my students, and haven't been able to find it since. And I sure wish I had it back. It's one of those that it was kind of a turning point for me. It was just one of those watercolors that just painted itself. And so, this is another watercolor that pretty much painted itself. This is from the Sonoran Desert in the mountains above the Phoenix Valley. For the longest time, as I sat with that Arizona landscape, I wondered how to paint it. And after about 5 years of going down there and delivering paintings to a gallery that represented my work, I finally figured it out. And sometimes it takes some time sitting with your space that you find yourself in, learning about it, acclimating yourself to it, so you can execute a meaningful painting about it. And there are a lot of bad watercolors that I'm not showing you that led up to this one. Okay? So there's a lot of trial and error. This is from the San Rafael. This is at that bottom of Buckhorn Wash. And this is from 2015. I was just with a few other artists from Plein Air Painters of Utah. We went out to the West Desert to paint today. And I dragged them out there, and only a few came, but they were the hardy ones. And we painted out there today, and we talked about the old times of going to Buckhorn Wash and in the San Rafael and how beautiful that place was. Vermilion Cliffs, not being vermilion. this was, the time of day dictates the color of red rock sometimes, red rock country. And this was the color in the late afternoon, early evening, while the sun was still a little bit high. These were the colors that showed up in the landscape. So this is a painting that is painted with two mediums, acrylic and watercolor. Acrylic first and then watercolor over the top. That may seem counterintuitive, but we had Stephen Quiller come to Utah and teach a workshop for us one spring. It was in the spring. And he taught us that idea. So what I wanted to do was establish the colors of that morning sunrise and not disturb it when I painted the colors over the top. So the yellow and orange and reddish and the pinkish hues, they are done in acrylic, and I let it dry. Now you have to apply the acrylic so that it goes down in a thin wash-like manner. If you get very thick with the paint at all, it will keep the watercolor from having a foothold to hang on to. And so you end up not allowing the watercolor to work as...
You're painting on canvas.
No, this is paper.
What kind of paper?
I work with all kinds, arches, Fabriano. Lately, I've been loving Blick paper. Really loving the Blick brand paper.
Why did you start with acrylic first? In other words, you can get
Because I did not want to reconstitute the paint that is depicting the yellow of the sunrise. I wanted to paint all of that, let it dry, paint over the top. I wanted to re-wet it with water, and then paint the dark morning clouds into it and not disturb anything, what was underneath. And so logistically, it just helped me to accomplish what I wanted to do.
Does the shine get altered once you put the watercolor over the acrylic? Because you know how acrylic can be a little shiny and the watercolor is...
Again, you need to paint the acrylic in a thin, wash-like manner. If you paint it thick, that's when you get that acrylic shine. You're painting this thin, 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 thin,
So,
washy, okay?
Tom, did you leave some white areas for the clouds on the paper? Or?
Well, they're not perfectly pure white, but they're pretty close,
Okay.
yeah. But this is the morning sunrise looking right out my front door.
So my question is that a single thin wash of acrylic that got those bright colors, or I know with watercolors you get brighter colors with glazing over and over again.
Okay, I got this in a single wash,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
And Stephen Quiller, when teaching about the mediums, he will tell you that acrylic is a more brilliant paint medium than watercolor, for what that's worth. I've never really... What's that?
What weight of paper?
140-pound cold press paper. I do a lot of demonstrations for my classes. This was a demo piece. And I set it up as a live setup in the classroom. But of course, I did imagine the kind of antique, bucolic setting that it is set in and brought that together. The flowers are actually plastic, but with the power of artistic imagination, we can do many wonderful things with paint. Sunset on the family farm. This is rather scarily prophetic. My daughter lives in Star, Idaho. It's a suburb of Boise. And there is incredible urban sprawl happening in the Boise area right now. And it is spreading from Boise to the west. And Star is starting to get engulfed. And these old family farms are shutting down. And they're just going derelict. And businesses are coming in, investors are buying them up and building McMansions across them. and it's hard to see. My daughter lives and works at a horse ranch, and we went around the corner to a 5-acre piece of land with a farmhouse and a small barn. 5 acres, guess how much?
Million? Somebody said million.
2.9 million. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But here, with this particular painting, I shouldn't get into the social economic stuff regarding, I should talk about art. But there's a lot of white being mixed in with the paint here. Not to try and make it opaque, but to try and make it viscous in a way that traditional transparent watercolor is not. There's actually a lot of white in the sky, but it's painted in a thin wash-like manner, and so it still helps to give a sense of transparency or luminosity to the sky. But the white paint, gouache paint being physically added to the transparent watercolor, there's a physical interaction that occurs between the colors there that causes the color to spread but sit. It still spreads when you paint wet into wet, but it tends to sit in its place a little bit better. So
it doesn't bloom, right? Like the watercolor?
blooming is less of a problem, that's true. Although it could still happen if you're not careful around the edges especially. Taped off the barn, and I taped off the landscape below. And I had all that taped off and so that I could charge in that sky and not worry about painting across my barn. In fact, the water puddle in front and the sky were painted at the same time. And then I let all of that dry. I peeled off all the masking and began painting the barn. Notre Dame, it was sad to see that, and so, I don't know, I just felt the need to paint it, and so I did. That's all I can say about it. This is outside of Capitol Reef National Park. It's between Torrey and Capitol Reef. Capitol Reef, one of my favorite places in the world. I love going down there. Don't you dare go, it's my place.
It's mine too.
Oh, it's yours? Okay, fine. I don't know if I have to share. But I've done 5 different versions of this, and I don't own any of them. They've all been sold right away.
How big is it?
This, I believe, is a 16 by 16.
Beautiful.
I plan to do more. Well, maybe one day I'll keep one on my wall. Okay. Window blind peak in the San Rafael country. So there's a dark, brooding, looming sky. It was the end of April, but there were a lot of thunderstorms rolling across that part of Utah. Yes, Gunther.
Last time I was down there, in Buckhorn Wash, there was a sign. Maybe it wasn't a sign, it was on the map. It said that Window Blind Peak is the tallest freestanding monolith in the Western Hemisphere.
Really? Well, that's cool. Wow. And it's just a beautiful peak. Catch it in the evening when the sun illuminates it. It's just a gorgeous thing. Fields and farms of Box Elder County, the Bear River Valley, where I grew up. This is at the mouth of Grand Wash in Capitol Reef National Park, at the top of Grand Wash. This is done on a different paper. This is done on Saunders Waterford paper. And I've had a real love-hate relationship with it. Saunders Waterford, the kind I have, maybe the recipe on it was a little squirrely when they made it at the time. It's older paper, but you apply watercolor to that and it just sucks it in and holds it. And well, you just can't get a decent wash to save your life. Luckily, I still pulled off a sky and went from there. This was I think it was a 20 by 10 size watercolor. This is Capitol Reef. These are the Fruta Cliffs. Spike Rez painted a knockout oil painting of the Fruta Cliffs recently. Two lips to kiss. No, two lips to kiss. That's what it is. The challenge for me in painting this, they were close to each other in proximity. They weren't that far apart from one another. One was slightly behind the other. The key was to help the one behind feel like it was behind. So I was very carefully working with edges to maintain them in such a way that they're definitive of the flower and yet soft enough that they sat back there in the distance against the foreground flower that was in much sharper visual relief. So, and I would be hard pressed to do that again. I should
Tom,
try it
on this
again.
one, did you put the loose background in first or like?
Okay, good question. So you'll see my rule of thumb about watercolor in a little bit, but I broke that rule when I painted this. The one color that is most easily contaminated on a watercolorist palette, especially transparent watercolorist palette, is yellow. And so I painted the yellow first and got that laid in there. And then from there, I painted in the background, just rich and full, and charged it in wet into wet, and finished it in one stretch. And then I came in with the oranges and the reds and the darker reds that helped to define the features of the flower. Okay? This is a barn in Spring City. Oh, I had to get one of those in. Little kitten. This is a plein air painting from the west side of the Ochre Mountains, Mercer Canyon. This is a small graveyard at the top of that hill. You can see the little picket fences that are around each of the grave sites. And this is the old town of Mercer, the graveyard that's out there. It's a monument to the people and the lives, the lives they lived out there and the difficulties they had. What? Uh-oh. Dang it, I'll have to go back to that. February thaw. This is Utah's West Desert, looking across the Rush Valley. And those are the Onaquai Mountains off in the distance. The clouds hanging over them. The passing, it had been stormy a day earlier, and the clouds were just still breaking apart and rolling across the valley, creating all those patterns of light and dark that you see that you can never nail down as an artist because they're constantly moving. So what you end up having to do is memorize your pattern and stick with it and don't chase the light. Indian Peaks in Utah's West Desert, that's where I was today. I didn't paint this today, I painted it in March when I was there. Beautiful peaks out there in the desert. One nice thing about going with family anywhere is I can break away and do a quick plein air painting. And so this is while visiting my son and his wife and their children, and Grandpa got away for a few minutes and did a painting. And, yeah.
Where's that?
Oh, that's in the hills south of Monroe. Yeah, in central Utah. So you're looking at the plein air study. This was the study I did on site. And then you're looking at the finished painting that was done in the studio, Desert Winter. So as a plein air painter, when I go out and paint on location, I'm not necessarily trying to paint a masterpiece. I'm getting notations down. I don't know what the odds are for or against my success as a watercolorist, but once in a while, I paint a plein air watercolor just as I like it, just as I want it, and I don't paint any more beyond that. But then there are times when the watercolor serves as a study and as a means to an end. And so when I go watercolor painting, plein air painting, I never do a bad watercolor. They're all good. They're all good for something. Some are good as a study for the finished piece. Some are good as they are. I think it's important to mention that because when you go out plein air painting, you know, you can feel like you want to just kill yourself after all your efforts and find out you painted a bad painting. Don't sweat it. Go out there and have fun, enjoy it, employ your skills, and know that you've got something that you can use as notations for future pieces. And I think that's the attitude you need to have. We're too hard on ourselves. We're too self-deprecating. So tonight, as I'm here with you, as I give demonstrations and presentations like this, these are one-time events. I feel that my job is to teach and inspire. Your job is to get inspired and then learn through doing. I promise you that if you say, oh, I learned so much tonight, I will nod my head and say that's nice. But I'll also say in my mind, you didn't learn a thing. Because you won't have learned something until you do the things that you're inspired by. You won't learn it until you do it. Learning is in the doing. I think that's true in the visual arts more than any other discipline that I can think of. Visual art is a kind of proficiency-based discipline, and it's through work and effort that you learn and grow, and you have greater frequency of success. I'm not even sure I bat 500 yet. Really. I don't think I do. But I'll do my best. Tonight's demonstration, go big or go home. Okay? So I've decided to go big, and I could really blow it. I could really ruin it. For a demo piece, I usually paint small for the sake of my own dignity. But I'm going to lay it out there, and we'll see what we do, what happens. All right, let's get this show on the road and do some painting. This is the painting I'm going to paint. It has the photograph at the bottom and a digitally enhanced, played with image on the top. Kind of puts it into painterly mode for me. And so it just gives me a vision of what the possibilities might be. Okay. Let's get this painting on the road. I really like this short-handled brush that I got at Lowe's. I got it because I thought it was such a cute brush. I liked the angle, but it also is a great brush for just laying water into my paper and getting ready for the painting. So just working that back and forth. Getting the surface as consistent as I can. I think I'm gonna go with this brush. This is a Princeton brand Neptune Series 1-inch brush. It's got a kind of a, I don't know, what kind of an end would you call that? Fitch, is that a filbert?
Filbert?
It's-
Yeah, it's like a filbert.
Yeah, filbert-ish. Okay. My colors are all kinds of colors. That's what I have in here, all kinds of colors. Does that answer the question? Okay. So once you start laying down the paint, it's just a matter of controlling chaos from there. And by the way, this will be just as much chaos at home. I'm just letting you see it happen. I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between cerulean blue and Prussian blue for my two blues that I'm mixing together. Am I causing that scratching to happen while?
It's a little temperamental, that mic is.
That's okay. I'm temperamental too.
Very good match.
Good match. Do you remember, Jeannie, when we had a Russian artist come
Yes, uh-huh.
and he was painting and he got himself worked into a sweat? Do you remember that?
Was he Russian or was he the one from South America that,
Oh, no, that was Alvaro Castagnet.
Yeah, Casino, yeah, he was.
No, Alvaro was just a good Canadian.
Oh, yes.
Why was he worked into a sweat?
He was just physically active.
Ferocious.
Just going for it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it was kind of, I worried for him.
He was passionate.
Passionate indeed. What's that old commercial, never let him see a sweat?
Right.
This is never let him see a spatter. I just spattered.
Better tricky.
So I'm taking a brush that's a little more, less paint in it, and now I'm controlling edges. While it's still wet, taking most of the water out and controlling edges. say wow yet.
So do you have
Wow,
any
'cause I can see
acrylic
the
in here, your
clouds.
palette?
No
Yeah?
acrylic,
It's all
no,
watercolor.
it's all
Okay,
water.
straight
It's all transparent. No, 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 I'm sorry. I've got some white mixed with some of my transparent watercolors right there in that
Oh, okay.
little row, second row.
Okay, like a wash.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. I
So
need to
you
grab
did,
some of
you
that.
just didn't go over the clouds,
Hmm?
you just left the clouds white, you didn't
Yeah,
put white paint?
that's what you usually do.
That's right.
Yeah, maybe the big one.
I have been known to have several brushes in one hand and have thought of myself as Edward Paintbrush Hands. I have, one of my colors here is Moon Glow Violet. I call it my dirty violet. I love how it puts in a color that's a wonderful transition between the white of the clouds and the blue of the sky. You may want to gather around as best you can, because I'm doing things here that you cannot see. I wish you could.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. I had my vaccination. I drank the Kool-Aid. I'm one of them. And I imagine many of you are as well.
Just don't block the camera.
I like the shape of that brush, the pointy one. They call it a cat's tongue. Yeah, so, called something, isn't it? Yeah.
One of the things I fear with these kinds of demonstrations is it can sometimes sort of become performance art. And I feel that can risk gypping one of the instruction that I hope they feel they're getting as they're watching a piece come together. So try not to be too wowed by humor and self-deprecating remarks. And just gotta remember which brush is which.
I like how big the brushes are.
Big or go home.
That's something I learned from several different artists, both watercolor and oils, that if you really want to get better fast,
Yeah,
is work with a bigger brush than what you're comfortable with.
that's true.
Come out of your comfort zone.
It's very true. Those are that's Stansbury Island in the distance. No, it isn't. It's, no, this is in Skull Valley looking northwest. It's those mountains on the west side on your way to Rowley.
Lakeside Range.
Yeah, Lakeside Range,
Oh,
okay. I knew you would know. How you doing?
Fine, how are you?
Doing great.
I've had both my shots.
Good.
Distemper?
December.
Distemper.
That would be my problem.
That was fun.
paper is wrinkling,
Yeah,
No amount of stretching is gonna help that, is it?
even after you
that's right.
wet it and then.
Even after if I
Doesn't
were to
cause it-
stretch it. There's a guy in Nevada, and I actually have a few of his units at my house. If anyone wanted to purchase one, they could, but they stretch paper. And it's a really unique and
Oh.
amazing
Down in
item.
Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, Dan LaRue.
Yeah, that's his name.
And haven't been able to talk to Dan for a while, but he designed these really cool stretchers, paper stretchers.
Did you stretch it before you laid it down with tape?
Did I? I laid it flat.
I mean, did you let it before you put it on?
No, no. No, the tape would not adhere if it were wet.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Did you used to do that?
This is 140 pound?
With that water?
I've tried stretching paper, this is 140. I've tried stretching watercolor paper enough to know that I never want to stretch it again. But Dan's method may work. It just may work. I don't know.
Carl Purcell's all about stretching paper.
Yeah. Well, I've seen the way Carl teaches enough that he scares me. Love him, love him.
But if you want to get the wrinkles out after, you can, once it's dry, you can flip it over and just do a light spray bottle, then have paper towels ready, put those on top, and then like a board and heavy books and cleanse it,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Exactly.
set your cabinets on it.
Just great books, right?
The Webster's dictionary that I have is ancient, that weighs 40 pounds, okay?
That'd be perfect.
Perfect.
I have a big one. I have a set. I have a lot of-
Why are you flicking?
Because I can. Oh, no!
Let's see what you.
It's a flying saucer.
The ones that are darker.
I am risking really blowing this painting here.
That's all right. We're good.
Makes us feel better
And
about
I'm
ourselves.
just really risking
How about our
looking
self-esteem?
the horse's patoot doing this. All right, let's just calm down and relax for a few minutes. Smoke 'em if you got 'em.
Tell what era you grew
I watched MASH. Watched Hawkeye say that. So I'm not cleaning the brush before I dip into this already pre-mixed and pre-made orange. I just am mixing what is on my brush with that orange. Now I'm going to paint. So I didn't get the slide up there and I didn't show you, so I'm gonna have to tell you about it. My policy when painting with watercolor is this: light to dark, top to bottom, back to front, and general to specific. And I break that rule all the time. I break it all the time. And when I painted the tulips, I broke that rule.
Great.
So it's a rule of thumb. So here, my rule that I'm following here is I'm painting from light to dark. These mountains have two colors on them. One is the part that's catching the light. One is the part that is in shadow. So I'm painting the light first. I'll paint shadow later on. And shall fall into shadow later. He has fallen into shadow.
Shadow knows.
as I'm painting, I'm purposely kind of hitting and missing in a place or two. I'm letting this be as loose as I can paint watercolor. Light to dark, top to bottom, back to front, general to specific. This painting is really humbling me right now. It's got me on the knees.
Going well.
No, I'm good. Has a little bit of an unwanted watermark going on there. A little bit of a blossom that I didn't want, so I had to take it out.
Did you have any markings on that?
I did.
Okay, because I'm seeing.
I loosely, lightly marked in the placement of the clouds. I didn't hold as well here as faithfully to the photograph as I had drawn them in.
Clouds move.
Yeah, thanks, that's
They
okay.
do, yeah. I quit sweating clouds. It's like,
Yeah,
move all
you
the
know,
time.
one thing about painting clouds is that, especially when plein air painting, is often I say, okay, there's clouds in the sky. That gives me a license to do what I want. And just come up with the clouds I want.
Yeah.
And so,
I love that one. Right.
now, I actually have a stick of a type of straight edge that is 4 feet long. It's made out of wood. And it's very thin and very light. I can lay it up there and draw a straight edge. Sometimes I will do that on these really big pieces.
Would something like a yardstick work?
The yardstick could work.
Okay.
When it comes to laying a wood stick down against, or any kind of straight edge, down against the paper and painting up against it, you have capillary action happening. And you have to decide whether you care about that or not. Maybe it's important that you not have capillary action. To me, it just adds to the watercolor, so I don't mind it. In fact, I actually could. Yeah, I've got this one footer here.
I take some wooden dowel, put 2 wooden blocks in it, so it's just above the paint.
And that would resolve that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one way to think about it. I just don't worry about it. I just let it sort of do its watercolor blurb blob thing.
Tom, I assume you're left-handed?
I assume so too. Yeah.
Having your hand in your pocket, does that balance you?
It puts my hand in a place where it won't get in the way. Now, an artist, online friend of mine, his left hand is named Bob. And he's right-handed, and every mistake he makes is Bob's fault. Bob gets in trouble a lot. There are a few who do. My challenge with that is that I wonder if it's maybe a little bit of a gimmick.
Yeah, a little bit
You
one
know,
of
I
a
mean,
gimmick.
When I was an undergraduate, there was one painting, I found myself painting with both hands,
Mm.
but only because I figured out how to make that one simple stroke with my right hand that got me what I wanted. Okay, we need some mud.
We've got some clay in our backyard if we need.
Possibly.
And horse manure also. Turns a little yellow with that.
I have carmine red, quinacridone red, and quinacridone rose. And this is some kind of a really bright pink. Why? Because real men paint with pink.
The opera pink?
No, not quite. I've
Okay,
never
that's-
been able to find opera pink there at the Blick store yet. I want to. It used to be.
Disappears.
I think they changed it though. It's
They
better than it was.
chemically balanced it, so it's a lot more
Really?
durable.
Yeah, it's
I thought
better
said
than
it
it
was bad.
So, it used to be one of the most disparaged colors in the palette. But
Ed Marion loved it.
two colors, I try to make sure my brush is really clean before I dip into it. My yellow and my cerulean blue. All the other colors, I'll dip into it with a dirty brush. And it has to fight to be clean. But yellow and cerulean blue are easily contaminated, and so I try to preserve those as best I can. Dip in my opaque
Do you
brown
ever,
of some sort.
in your paintings, do you ever glaze with multiple layers?
Yeah, I glaze quite a bit.
You have to wait for dry before you glaze it.
Yeah, I do. Otherwise, it's just a wet into wet application of paint. I mix honey with my paints.
Really? Make it stickier?
It makes it reconstitute more easily when I hit it with water. Make sure it's pure honey. And make sure it's fully warmed up and not sugarized,
Crystallized.
crystallized.
You do that again, why?
So that it will reconstitute the paint more easily when I hit it with a brush full of water.
Does it work that way with gouache as well?
No, gouache is a little trickier. These have gouache, and I have mixed honey with them, but they don't behave the same way that these do up here. But I do what I can.
Are you still teaching at Salt Community College?
Mhm.
Do you teach gouache with the watercolor?
It depends on how my group is doing as to whether I feel I can teach that or not. I just kind of go with what I feel I can work with them on. So, not always, but some semesters I do.
What does adjunct mean? Does that mean part-time?
That's right. Adjunct is college speak for part-time.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm laying in some textures to build on. They're just abstract textures, trying to think of relatively light and dark passages, and just trying to get some patterns in there to build on. Oh my goodness. Brush, that is so cool. Now that's dark. I don't have black on my palette. I have some pretty dark tones, but no blacks. Black, I think, is best mixed. Now, in my oil paints, I will pull out black to mix with yellow to get conveniently to an olive green. All right, finally, I think I can take a little snoozer. I mean break. And usually this is a point where I'm going out and pulling weeds in the garden or watering the lawn. But I just need a little time away from it and just let it sit and come back with some fresh eyes. So the question is, what are your questions? What questions do you have at this point? I'm glad I've been so clear and answered them all for you.
When you add white gouache to your watercolor, you still consider it a watercolor painting, not a
Oh, for
gouache?
sure. For sure.
Okay.
The Transparent Watercolor Society of America are the only ones who police transparent watercolor. No one else does. In fact, they watch how you use yellow ochre, cadmium red, and cerulean blue.
Because they have more pigment?
They naturally have more opacity to those pigments. So you have to be very, very careful about how you use them when it comes to entering anything into the Transparent Watercolor Society of America. I think it's an interesting challenge for someone to stay strictly transparent. Christy Grusendorf is one person who does that very, very well. At least she does that for her paintings that she enters in Transparent Watercolor Society of America. She may use white in other applications, I don't know.
I think so.
It would be an interesting question to ask her. But,
So if
yeah,
you-
it's still a
So
watercolor.
if you had a little bit of acrylic in your initial washes, you'd still call it a watercolor?
I would
Or
change
do you-
I would change it to water media, or
Okay.
mixed media.
That's interesting, thanks.
Mhm.
Why is transparent watercolors, I mean, I know there's a difference, but why are some people so focused on just using transparent?
That's considered to be in some people's minds, the best way to use watercolor. But one of the great champions of watercolor from art history are the English. And they used a lot of white in their watercolors.
So did Winslow Homer.
Winslow Homer did
shots of
use white quite a bit. So did John Singer Sargent. And so, white can be okay and good to use. But it is an interesting challenge to just do transparent. Just paint strictly transparent. But I hope you saw the little bit of difference between that barn painting, Sunset on the Family Farm, and the other watercolors that you saw in relationship to it. There was a slight difference there. That one had a lot of white used in it. Okay.
The barn did.
The barn did. Actually, the sky. The sky was where most of the white was used. Okay. So let me hold it up for you to see. Funny cast shadow from the wrinkly paper. But that's where we're at.
When it dries, it will flatten a little, won't it?
I will leave it for a couple of days before I take the paper off. I will let it get good and dry and flat. Of course, in the summertime, you could probably take it off after a couple of hours. But, yeah.
Does the color fade at all if you put it out in the sun?
It will fade, yeah, it will fade in the sun. Mhm. That's why my wife accuses me when I'm in my studio of being a vampire, because the shades are drawn. So I'm protecting my watercolors. Okay, I'm going to start up again here now. So, a couple of more charges of color. What time do we have?
Almost 8:15.
Almost 8:15?
Well, you got another 15 minutes.
Do I? Then we're doomed. I'm doomed. There's no way I'm gonna finish this at 8:15. But that doesn't matter. That matters not.
Brandon Clary one time, he didn't finish the portrait he was doing, but it looked great by the time he was.
Yeah.
So the question of dark, light to dark, and I'm seeing dark with a lot of white. Are you gonna paint over that white with a lighter color?
Yep,
Breaking the rule.
yep.
Yep.
Breaking the rule. I'm a rule breaker. See, I set them up so I can break them.
It seems like all of art's like that.
What's that?
Seems like all of art is like that.
They're not rules, they're just suggestions.
That's right.
Kind of like the- kind of like the speed limit.
Or like Mexican bus schedules. Suggestions.
Okay. I'm gonna paint the cast shadows of the clouds onto the mountains. So I'm gonna be carving that up very carefully here. Okay. This is where I am drawing. I'm drawing with brush and paint. But it's the same as if I were drawing with a graphite pencil. So drawing skill for the artist is still critical.
How brush is that one, Tom?
This is a low Cornell, size 14, 70/20 ultra round. No brush in the world gets rounder than this one. It's the ultra round.
If you don't believe it, just look at their literature.
The brush says so, it's got to be true. But it has a beautiful tip to it. It has a nice long pointed tip that I really like.
And that's the part you draw with.
That's right.
Everything else is just a reservoir.
Yep. Yes, capillary action is happening, and yes, I'm okay with it. Just keep that in mind.
Just the paper's still damp.
It's a little on the dampish side, yeah. It almost doesn't matter what dark I'm using right now, as long as it's dark.
Touching in the lighter colors, kind of through the background.
Touching the light colors what?
Well, if it's still in the gaps between the dark.
Starts to do that.
You were touching layers of broken.
That's because I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
Get your stretchy pants on. Didn't I break down yesterday? I forgot yesterday. I
Da, 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 da. Okay. That's it. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen to this painting. I'm gonna huck it, no, I'm gonna.
It's a Frisbee.
I'm actually going to put it in a big tub and wash as much of the paint off as I can.
No, why? That's crazy. Think about it 2 minutes.
And then I'm going to restate the entire painting. I'm going to repaint it, and I'm going to bring a degree of what I do with my oil paintings, especially my oil paintings on panel, is I'll give them a light sanding between each layer of paint. And I'll just knock back what I've done and then come over the top of it again. And it brings a degree of complexity to the image that I think helps it to feel more complete. That's what I'm going to do with this watercolor. This, by the way, is the first candidate for my show I'll be having at Phillips in April of next year.
Cool. Do you know what month or?
April,
There you go, cool.
yeah, so. Yeah, so we'll be, I'm preparing for that, and you just saw the first of 20 painting, watercolors and oils that I need to get done
Cool. Where's that going to be?
at Phillips Gallery.
Downtown.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Okay, any questions?
So what are you gonna do after you put it in the tub?
Just let it soak, then take a brush and scrub over it. Just scrub back and just kind of wash the brush over it. And just knock back everything that I've done, and then let it dry.
Then you just have a shadow of it?
Yeah, I just have a residue left that I begin to paint back into.
Will the whites stay clean, or will they be a
No,
little?
the whites may dirty up just a bit. Yeah,
Would you,
What kind of paper is that?
This
I know
is
it's
Arches.
140 pound, but that's Arches.
this Arches 140-pound cold press.
Okay. What does doing that to it do to the calendar?
Okay, good questioning. It will wash out some of the sizing that's on the paper. So what it will end up doing is it will end up causing the paper to lock in more of the paint as I lay it down there. But I have a foundation on which to build to build this painting. Believe it or not, that's the part of the process I'm looking forward to. I really am. So, was there another question?
no, yeah, you ain't doing it.
Our vote is you don't do that. We're really liking
Yeah.
it. You know what I really like?
put it away.
Is your shadows are kind of the clouds are kind of abstract. So it's a mixture of realism and.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like that too.
Thank
Just
you.
think about it. Wait 2
Claire.
days and
Well,
think
you can
about
always
it.
buy it.
Have a brownie first.
That's true. I like it so much. Buy it.
Thank you for that
I agree
expression,
with
but I don't care what you think. I'm gonna give it a shot and see what happens.
Do you do that with all of them?
No, this is something I'm learning to do.
Where
See,
did
the
you
only
learn?
difference between you and me is I'm just a little more experienced as a student, but we're all students. We're all still learning.
Go for it then.
Okay.
Where did you learn to do that?
I've been talking with Doug Fryer. He's my guru. He's my Zen Buddhist master.
Does he call you grasshopper?
He calls me moron, no. Okay, thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Tom.